Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. No hat today. Won't even fit with all the hair I've got right now. I got a haircut scheduled first thing tomorrow morning with Kimberly. You've seen her on my channel. She's a manager for a country artist who I've also featured on the channel. Well, maybe Instagram I've mainly featured her. Again, follow me on Instagram. I mainly post those stories that only last 24 hours. So you have to check my stuff pretty regularly. But it's cool because I like to do that. And then I can follow you guys back, see what you're posting. It's just been a little more fun than doing YouTube shorts and videos like I did in the past. But in any case, wanted to follow up on my last video with this video on the Zoom with Edgar and continue one of the topics we touched on, or at least one of the things that popped out to me that we started to talk about was how he did the measurements in his office using just desktop speakers. And I was shocked at not only the delta of how it measured before and after, but the end result was just a speaker that was incredible measure. Now, he was in the near field, which gives you a lot of advantages of taking the room out of the equation and making it really easier for DSP to do its job. And man, I tell you what, though, the end result is better. In fact, I did an overlay for you guys to see of $200,000+ Wilson speakers or whatever it is that were measured in stereophile in room at one of these major reviewers. And it's no contest on that metric. You know, certainly other advantages big speakers have, but you got to be also careful about big speakers. As I've talked about before, big speakers rarely launch bass in the right part of the room as it should be launched. So when you buy these huge monstrous speakers with everything in one cabinet, you're taking a big risk there. But there is a guy, I want to give him credit. Yeah, now I'm drawing a blank. Aaron, I think it's Aaron. He does a clipo measurement, and he had a video. I didn't watch the whole thing, but it was very good. I want to go back to it, where he was talking about big speakers and why they sound bigger. And it makes you think of some things that people intuitively probably don't deduce. And it's not because, in a lot of cases, not because they're better. And it's a lot of perception and also the bass side of things. But he goes into a lot of detail. Now, I didn't get or see yet where he talks about point source arrays like this or line sources, which also are another level of nuance. But anyway, I don't want to get off in the weeds, and you should watch his video on that. But it brought up a macro point because I also saw where people were comparing their system online or their speakers to Ferraris. And I started thinking about that. Of course, there's haters, you know, that just want to hate on that, and that's not the way to come at it. But I started thinking you probably don't want to think of your high-end system and speakers and stuff as the equivalent or analogy to Ferraris. And let me tell you why as I started thinking about this. Number one, and as it ties into this video where we show desktop speakers actually outperforming, at least in frequency response and certain metrics, much better than the big speakers. And the same is true with Ferraris and maybe a SUV from Lexus or Camry. A Ferrari is really only superior if it's on the racetrack. It's meant for speed. It's not good on many metrics of what you use a car for whether it's comfort, reliability, ease of use, so many metrics, normal roads. It just is not conducive to outperforming a SUV from Lexus or something. So only if you put that Ferrari on a test track, a racetrack, and measure the performance of it, does it do better than, in some ways, other types of cars. So in my opinion, on two things, two nuances here. Number one, when you buy these expensive speakers, if you do dial it in, you do get the great measurements and you do get the right environment, put it on the right road, per se. It's better than a Ferrari because a Ferrari is only enjoyable in those unique situations when you're on a test track. Yeah, you get the bragging rights when you're driving around and get that status. Maybe that's another reason why people buy it. But you actually get much more value from your high-end system than a Ferrari. You can use it all the time, like you use your Lexus in your car for everything. So I think it's a much better value to buy high-end speakers than it is to buy a Ferrari. But you can also, just like Ferraris, lower price speakers can outperform them if you spend the time to dial it in. You put that Ferrari in a bad room, You put that high-end speaker in a bad room, you don't tweak it with DSP, you don't do anything with room treatment, you don't show measurements to show you're getting the performance that you paid for, then it's not really worth it. It's just a status symbol. It's just like people that buy Ferraris just for status or bragging rights. So it takes a village, and it's much more nuanced and complicated than these primitive analogies tend to be used out there. You really want to think it through. And in this case, you're going to see a small speaker outperform a big speaker, at least in the metric of frequency response and impulse response and spatial cues, which are three very important things. But yes, watch that video from Aaron to get a little more insight. I think it's really worth watching. And also watch this video with Edgar so you can see that a lot of times you can even the playing field. You don't have to spend a fortune. You can get as good or even better with what you have if you use the tools to mate it right. The right car on the right road for the right taste and everything is going to be better than just putting XYZ monster speaker in any room, no measurements. And one of the things that's my pet peeve, I talked about this, why don't any of these people, if you go on the racetrack with a Ferrari, people are going to be bragging about their measurement and what their speed and all this stuff. Why do we never see anybody tout their measurements with their equipment? It's just crazy. There are objective high fidelity standards. It doesn't mean that you have to like them, but at least if you show that you're in the ballpark, if you show that you can achieve certain levels that are generally accepted, there's no argument with certain things, okay? You can put ketchup on steak all you want, but that's fine. But there are objective standards that you have to meet to be called high fidelity and apply your system in terms of would other people in general like it. So in any case, I wish more people would show their measurements. You should ask all these people, reviewers, people online bragging about their system, YouTubers, where are the measurements? At least show where you deviate from standards and you still think it's good. So people know that, okay, well, I like a little bit different. And so you know whether to trust that person or not. I put all my measurements up here for you to see. You can come to my room anytime. So hopefully more people will start doing that. But enjoy this Zoom because this will show you how to get great performance from a less expensive speaker, which is something everybody can enjoy.
To realize is that these are just desktop speakers. And look at how flat this response is. You can actually go, I have a video in my membership section. You can actually go to Stereophile, where they went to one of the famous reviewers at the time. He worked for Stereophile and took measurements in his room, actually only 1 foot away, on these $mega speakers. They weren't even near as good as this under 1,000 hertz.
No, these speakers are so good that when I play that, I mean, now they're so good now. That when I play this little loud of mine, if it wasn't for this, because I'm in the near field, I can barely tell the difference in terms of detail and naturalness and the imaging than with a far more expensive speaker I have. I'm not going to say the brand name in my equipment room at home. Now, of course, if I sit far away, the SP, if I want to get that same sound pressure level, these are going to distort. So these are not really made for critical listening from far away. But from that here, once I flat them, it's really hard to beat them. And especially the impulse response is quite good. And look at the crosstalk cancellation level I'm getting right here. It's above 10, quite often 15 decibel. So the image is completely 3D with proximity and everything.
Yeah, and if you added a sub with that to fill in, I mean, obviously you can't DSP, 20 hertz into a speaker that can't move that air. But yeah, you could get incredible.
You can, but that would be a very low volume. In other words, look, if I if you want, you can boost up this to 48 dB, and it will lift that up, but then you will lose so much dynamic range that there's no more volume. Again, so it's the same thing that you're saying. You won't be able to move that much air, but we can correct it. And by the way, I should say something about bass. Bass can only be corrected really with DSP. Anybody who tells you they have a fur that's going to correct your bass in your room and with the right bass trap, you will have to have a very detailed numerical model of your room and a lot of bass traps and a lot of subwoofers positioned right for you to get bass. But with any room correction, well, with any good room correction, ORC included, you're perfectly flat if you have, and in this case I can't because there's nothing to work with here. But if there is something to work with, you can get completely flat. Because in real life, you're going to have a room mode. So depending on the frequency at a given position, you're either having destructive interference or constructive interference. You're either going to boost, you're always going to get up and down frequency response like this in a real life. When you see a frequency response that's flat, you realize that you realize that somebody was using DSP. I'll give you an example. Just this Sunday, I visited someone I know who's well-known audio critic, and we were testing the speakers which had DSP on. So we decided to flatten to the feed, and we made a measurement first without Bach. And I realized they were completely flat here. I said, I told him, I'm sorry, the room correction must be on. He said, no, it's off. I said, it's impossible to have a flat curve like this all the way to 20 hertz by, with a subwoofer. And then sure enough, he checked, he had forgotten to turn on the room correction. So that's bass, you gotta believe in DSP. DSP is really essential for getting you places where 5-10 years ago we thought this impossible. So anybody who dissed DSP is archaic in many ways. And of course, it's a hobby, you can say anything you want, but you're not near getting near it. It's like saying I love black and white TV. Of course, it's an aesthetic, but you cannot argue that black and white TV is better truth than a very correct color TV. Now, a lot of my favorite movies are, believe it or not, are black and white. So I'm not dissing black and white, but the idea that the DSP is something to be shunned is, I think, will be. I'm so thankful to Jason, who has been doing a lot of proselytizing before, convince people that if you really want to listen to natural sound, you've got to let the computer power unleash it in your favor. Of course, with the right algorithms.
Yeah, and I've recorded a video that I'm going to release probably even before this Zoom that addresses DSP fallacies and primitive arguments to address that a little bit better. But one thing that's very important to notice, like you said, DSP in the bass, a lot of knee-jerk reactions are you can't DSP your way out of room modes and all this kind of stuff. And to a certain extent, in this case, we didn't 100% cure both channels, but it's so much better, and so much better than without DSP, that it's sheer folly to claim that DSP cannot help in the bass. And I showed in my video that you probably haven't seen yet, I'm getting flat measured bass all the way to 20 hertz. That's not only the target, but my measured. And yeah, that's because I put a lot of effort into sub matching, and I do have speakers and subs that go to 20 hertz. But if you put the effort in, you can get pretty much near perfection. But really, for a desktop speaker, this is incredible. I mean, this would sound incredible and beat a lot of much more expensive speakers. One thing I wanted to ask you, though, Edgar, the frequency response, we talked about this. This is it has that title on the top, psychoacoustically compensated binaural. And then it's kind of exploded, but there is another frequency response curve on the left people are used to. Can you explain the differences between the two?
This is pretty much taking the signal, the other microphones, and doing what's called a fast forward. Now we're looking at it in the frequency domain. That's pretty much the raw that the microphones measure, okay? But it's not how humans hear. Humans use precedence effect. They are going to be vastly biased by the direct sound and its content, okay? So the room is going to absorb a lot of high frequency to a concert hall and sit in the 12th row and crash a cymbal or fire a gun on stage and measure the frequency response. There's almost no high frequency. It's all absorbed, okay? But you bring compasses, it's fine. Understand this is how life sounds right in real life. Now, what happens is this is how the microphones measure it. We correct it. We actually do something called diffuse equalization, which is something how and also we do a composite spectrum, as I mentioned earlier, made out of the early sound, high frequency component of the early sound, and the low frequency component of the low sound. How to mix them and the proportion is a proprietary recipe, but the bottom line, you have to separate these. And then this is the spectrum of how humans are hearing that sound. This is how Edgar Yuri is those speakers. to the best knowledge scientifically, and then we start this and correct it. But in the process of correcting this, even that one is being, look what happened to that one, it's also being corrected. So it's completely flattened right here, okay? And then here, this slight correction, the right correction for the pinna. So, but this is not what I'm hearing, this is what the microphones are measuring, and this is what I'm hearing at my ears. So here is psychoacoustically compensated binaural response as opposed to the binaural response. It's a binaural frequency response.